Hello, on the Daily Family. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we're talking about the fear of being seen and how it is very easily confused with needing more strategy. And this could be particular, we'll say this is particular like in business or in like social media. A lot of people think they just need a better social media strategy, or they just need like they just need more business strategy, and then that would solve all their problems. But based on certain aspects or certain placements in your birth chart, you might actually just have a fear of being seen that you need to look at. So in this episode, I'm going to go through all of those placements, and I would love to know if you have any of them, because I have many of them. Okay, let's get into this episode. Hello and welcome back. Let's talk about the feeling of like, I need more strategy in business, or I need more strategy in social media. And that's why I'm not, I don't have 100 million bazillion followers. Most of the time, you do not need more strategy. Most of the time, what you actually need is just to heal your fear of being seen. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, Danielle, like, how do you know? Like, how do you know it's a fear of being seen? Because I am an astrologer. And I look at birth charts a lot. So there are a few placements and certain aspects to a birth chart that I see that for sure are more prominent to having a fear of being seen for whatever reason. So I'm going to go through a few of those today. And I have my notes because I don't want to forget any. Okay, so if you have any 12th house placements, or if you have any 8th house placements, and I mean like major planets. So I don't mean like, oh, my Chiron is in the 8th, or like, oh, my Chiron is, there are Chiron placements where this matters, but we're talking like Sun, Moon, Rising, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, Mars, right? Neptune. Pluto, because Pluto's more of a generational planet. So is Uranus, kind of so is Neptune. So like really just like those inner planets, like major planets, major personal planets, any of the like 8 or 9 major personal planets, if you have in 8th or 12th house, there's usually a fear of being seen. And so with 8th house, it usually comes to like feeling unsafe to be vulnerable. Like it feels like you're not safe if you put yourself out there. 12th house is more that like you like to be hidden, you like to remain a mystery. So the idea of like putting yourself out there kind of makes you feel like you're in this vulnerable position. And that is really scary. So you often try to hide yourself or like stay in the background, and that can translate to like not putting your message out there, not being, not allowing yourself to be seen, not marketing, not selling, whatever it is that you do. It can result in a lot of hiding happening. The other one is the Chiron placement. So in astrology, Chiron is our wounded healer. And by the way, like if you have never really looked at your birth chart, you can look for your birth chart. You can look up your birth chart for free. I like Astro-Charts. AstroSeek is another one, astro.com. There's a lot of different websites you can go to where you can actually see your birth chart. I like Astro-Charts because it actually like lists out your placements instead of you just having to figure out how to read the natal chart. I definitely recommend you learn how to read the natal chart. It's actually not that complicated, but if you're like beginner and you just want to see if you have any of these placements, just look up on Astro-Charts and it'll give you an actual like list of like, it'll say your sun is in this sign, your whatever is in this sign. So I really like that. So yeah, make sure you look up your birth chart. If you do know your birth chart and you like do end up having a lot of these placements and you're like, I should dive deeper into this, I do readings. So I do a 2-hour natal chart and human design reading where we go through both of your charts. And then we also tap like into your subconscious mind and your programming and kind of like connect the dots and draw the bridge between all of these things. So if you ever want one of those, then you can slide into my DMs on Instagram and I can send you the link, or you can go to my website, daniellemccleary.com/work-with-me, and then scroll down to the natal human design chart reading. You can book one of those. Okay, so back to this. Chiron in astrology is called the wounded healer. So this is like wounds in this life that we came here to heal. And if you have Chiron in your first house or your 10th house, that can indicate a fear of being seen. If it's in your first house, the first house is all about self. It's your identity. It's the way you present yourself. It's your looks. And if Chiron is there, then a lot of these wounds you have are around yourself and the way that you show up, the way that you present yourself, etc. If you have it in the 10th house is all about your career and your public image. So any wounds you have in your career and public image usually show up as not putting yourself out there, not allowing yourself to be seen for your gifts out of fear of being judged, out of fear of, people misunderstanding you, etc. The other one, if you have Lilith. So Lilith there's a couple different ways. People call her Black Moon Lilith. People call it Lilith. If Lilith is in your 12th house or your 10th house, that can indicate a fear of being seen. So if Lilith is in your 12th, again, this is you kind of like being dark and mysterious. So there's almost this feeling of no, I can't let people know me because then I'm not relevant anymore. I'm relevant because I am hidden, right? If it's in your 10th house, like me, I have Lilith in my 10th, and Lilith in the 10th is very much you kind of have this, you really don't like the typical way of doing things. Everything you do is kind of through this lens of I actually don't want to do this like everyone else. And you kind of have a real disdain for authority. And so with Lilith in the 10th, you almost and the way it shows up for me is I'll always be oh, I could tell you how I feel, but you don't want to hear that. And this fear of it being misconstrued as inauthentic or as rude or as out of touch or whatever else. So we tend to just I know what I want to say, but I also know what you're going to think, and I'm just not going to say it. So that's how then we can kind of have this fear of really being seen for our true thoughts. And to be honest, this is something that I have been dealing with and working through for the last few years. And I feel only since the end of last year has this all kind of come to fruition for me. And I've really just started to step into the real spiritual side of me, because I think sometimes I feel that side of me won't be accepted, but that's actually the realest part of me. So just know, if you have Lilith in the 10th, you're not alone. And I've been working through it in real time with you. Okay, so then if you have Saturn conjunct, which means close to your sun, your moon, or your rising. Again, this is me. My second house is in Sagittarius, and in there I have sun, moon, Uranus, Mercury, and Saturn all conjunct, meaning a few degrees apart. So if you have Saturn conjunct your sun, moon, or rising in any sign, that can indicate a fear of being seen, because there's always this Saturn is dad. I always say mother, the moon is mother. It's going to teach you, it's going to nurture you, it's going to give you maternal energy. Jupiter is zaddy because it's the planet of luck and expansion, and Saturn is dad. He's going to teach you lessons. And so if you have Saturn close to your sun, your moon, or your rising, it's your emotions are tied up in that. The way you present yourself is tied up in that. Your personality is tied up in that. And Saturn teaches you lessons. So you're going to maybe you've put your foot in your mouth one too many times. Maybe you've been criticized for the way you look. Maybe if somebody disagrees with you or misunderstands you, it really, really emotionally affects you. And so oftentimes people with, and this is me for a long time, my whole 20s, this was me, until my Saturn return actually at 27. You just don't really put yourself out there because you're tired of learning these lessons associated with it. So then the next one is if you have Pluto in the 1st or the 10th house, also me. Told you I have most of these, so we are in it together. Pluto is it's the planet of death and rebirth and transformation. So if your Pluto's in the 1st house, you personally are always going through a death and a rebirth and a transformation. This is me. I have Pluto and Scorpio in the 1st house, and most of my generation, the millennial generation, is the Pluto and Scorpio generation. So if you're a Scorpio rising, you also have Pluto in the 1st house, like me. And Pluto is the sign of death and rebirth. Scorpio is the sign, or Pluto's the planet of death and rebirth. Scorpio is the sign of death and rebirth. So for me, having Pluto in the first house is like, I am always undergoing like some sort of death and rebirth, ego death, ego transformation. And so like, really, I now have this rule that like, if you knew me a year ago, no, you didn't, because I'm constantly evolving and transforming. And like, really the people in my life that stick around are really just the ones that can like handle the ride, because I'm always evolving. And I used to see that as like, I used to not really love that about myself, because I felt like I could feel people's projection that like I lacked consistency and that I was always changing my mind, or I was always like becoming someone else, which wasn't true. I was just always transforming and like learning lessons. Like for me, if you have Pluto in the first house, I think for me, it's like, you know how some people go, they like, there's moments in your life where you go, why did I say that? Or like, why am I so upset about this? Why am I triggered by that? And then you kind of like do a little bit of self-exploration to try to figure out like why something is bothering you as much as it is. That is me 24/7. Like the second I get triggered, I'm like, ooh, what does this say about me? Ooh, what can I learn from this? Ooh, how can I heal deeper? Constant evolution. Okay. So Pluto in the first house, it affects your ability to be seen, because you're kind of like, well, I'm going to be somebody else next week. So like, it's okay if people don't see like this version of me. We good. Right. So then there is Pluto. Then if you have Pluto in the 10th, it's very similar to that, but it's to do with your career. So like you've probably done a lot of things in your career. You've probably tried a lot of things in your career. You've done a lot of, you've probably had a lot of different jobs. You probably had a lot of different like ahas, epiphanies. And so maybe you like have a fear of being seen, because the projection of that is that you don't commit to anything. You're flaky, you're flighty, whatever. And then you kind of get into this habit of like not showing up and not allowing yourself to be seen, because every time you are, people have something to say about it. So people with Pluto in the 10th usually have a fear of being seen as well. But again, it's like, of course, your career and your public image is going to transform a lot over time. You have Pluto there, but that's your journey. That's what you're here for. And it's actually one of your superpowers. So the quicker you can release that, the more powerful you're going to be able to show up, right? A lot of Virgo placements kind of have a hard time being seen, and they have this like fear of being seen because of the perfectionism. And I'll talk to people all the time. They're like, I'm a Virgo and I'm the messiest person around. Maybe you're messy in like the traditional sense of messy, but I bet your mind is not messy. I bet like, and if it is messy, it's because you're trying really hard for it not to be messy, that like even like the degree to which you are messy is a perfectionist trait. So there's this perfectionism that exists inside of Virgo energy that like it needs to be understood. It needs to be perfect. Things need to be in place. Everything needs to follow a system, a path. There's a rigidity to it. Virgo is my South Node. So I have a lot of past life energy as a Virgo. And so I feel the Virgo energy very deeply. It's something, if it's in your South Node, it's something that you've hopefully mastered. So it's not something that like plagues me every day, but I definitely understand Virgo. And so if you have a lot of Virgo placements, you sometimes have a fear of being seen because it's like not perfect yet. And the minute you can transcend that and realize that like your version of perfect is so far beyond most people's version of perfect, that you showing up just as you are in like your version of what is a mess, it's going to be so inspiring and so beautiful to so many people. If you have a lot of Cancer placements, you're really intuitive, so you kind of like sense what's going on, and you don't always show up because you don't want to deal with like the fallback of that. That's very similar to Scorpio. Scorpios have this projection field around us. So if you have a lot of Scorpio placements, this is me. I have Scorpio in the first house with 3 planets, Mars, Pluto, and rising. So with all of those placements there, like I'm a 2-line in human design. So I have a pretty big projection line. And, it's like, I'll go, I know what I could say right now, but I also know what's going to come back at me, and I'm just like not interested in dealing with it. So I'm just not going to say anything. So oftentimes like we hide how we really feel. We hide how we're really thinking, because it's often not socially acceptable, right? It's like often like, you know, that song by Bare Naked Ladies that's like, I'm the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. Like I related to that so much, because I always have an unpopular opinion. I always think differently than the collective. And I see this a lot with like, you know, when I was living in LA, I'm obviously married to a woman. So people assume that I'm into astrology. So people just like assume that I am like super far left Democrat. And like when I say, no, I'm actually an independent. And like, in a lot, like not in a lot of social ways, but like in a lot of certain ways, I do have some conservative values. And in other ways I have social values. And like, it really just depends on what we're talking about. People like don't really know what to do with that. So like when I would say that, I would get like a lot of pushback and a lot of hate and a lot of like, but I think if you have a lot of Scorpio placements, like you kind of just see things differently than everyone else. And so therefore, like you don't always like to voice it because you know that people are going to disagree with you and you're just like not really interested in like dealing with it today, A Capricorn and Aquarius placements kind of too. Capricorn, you are often perceived as a sign that only cares about yourself and your money, your bag, your job, your life. I think like Spencer Pratt, if you've been following the Spencer Pratt saga on TikTok and Instagram, he's a really good example of this. He's a Capricorn rising, and a lot of people just assume that all he cares about is money and all he cares about is himself. But he's also a Scorpio moon, so he has this double. Capricorn risings, there's nothing they care about more than legacy, but it's all legacy for your family. It's like, it's trying to provide the best life possible for everything you're going to leave behind to your kids, to their kids, to your lineage, whatever it is. And so I think a lot of like Capricorn placements have a fear of being seen because you don't want to be like misunderstood as like too selfish or too into yourself or too self-involved, when really you're kind of here to teach us about legacy and to actually like care about the people in your life. So I think it's a really beautiful quality that Capricorn risings have. And it's like, if we think of going back to like the Spencer Pratt thing, if we go back to it, that like he's super honest about the fact that like, yeah, I'm going to help rebuild everything. But like right now, my concern is like getting myself and my family a home and getting my parents a home, because his parents' house burned down in the California wildfires also. So it's like, that's very Capricorn energy. And it's really cool to see him just like kind of fighting what I'm sure is a projection field of like knowing what people are going to say and doing it anyway, because more than anything, he cares about his family. If you have Aquarius placements, you're kind of an alien. You think a lot, you think really differently and innovatively. Like you're always 10 steps ahead in your mind than most other people. And so I think that there's just this disassociation that happens with an Aquarius, but especially now that we're in the Aquarian age, Pluto and Aquarius, like we need the Aquarius placements to come to the front. Like we need you to come to the front big time. And you coming to the front and you stepping up and you allowing yourself to be front and center and you allowing yourself to be seen is so, so important right now. And I really hope that you do it, because we need you. We need your ideas. We need you to bring us into this like new paradigm. We need you to bring us, into a higher timeline of connectedness, humanitarianism through innovation. If you if you have any, this is the last one, Pisces placements. My sweet Pisces. Pisces placements are so dreamy and spiritual, and you're always kind of living in another world. Like you're kind of always walking the line between like the spiritual realm and like the real, being in this world but not of this world. Like, am I a human? Am I not? And so there's just this like tenderness to Pisces energy that I just think like prefers to kind of like be a fish and like hide in the water. But we need you to be like a rainbow fish. Like we need to hear your spiritual insights. We need to hear your mind. We need to connect with you in our words. Like your intuition is so spot on. We need to hear you. Similar to, it's very similar to like Cancer energy, but like Cancer energy, I think you don't like to be seen, because when you come out, when people see how intuitive and nurturing you are, people just expect a lot of you. And so you're kind of like, oh, like I'm not interested in that. No, thank you. Specifically like Cancer risings are like this. You feel put upon a lot. So you tend to like not put yourself out there. But we need the water signs to step forward, because we're moving into a time of intuition, and people that have really fluid intuition like really do need to lead the collective from a heart-centered space. So Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, you're still a water sign, even though you're boiling water. You're an honorary fire sign, but you are a water sign, and you have wicked intuition, and we really, really do need that. So, okay, if you have any of these placements, don't freak out. If you have a lot of these placements, hi, same. I have a lot of them. And I am living proof that like you can transcend these. You can allow yourself to be seen. You can allow yourself to be out there and put yourself front and center. You can. You just have to be willing to do the work. And that means you're going to have to be willing to be uncomfortable a little bit. It's not comfortable to put yourself out there. Like every time I do one of these podcast episodes, like the one I did last week about like spiritual awakenings, the whole time I made that episode, I remember being like, oh my gosh, everyone is going to think, I know what people are going to think. They're going to think I have lost the plot. But I also know that the right people are going to hear that and it's going to really make an impact. So it's really like detaching from people's expectations of you. And it's really about like detaching from what people might think or detaching from who might not agree with you and really tapping back into, but there are so many people that need to hear my wisdom. They need to hear my message. They need to hear me. And if I don't put myself out there, then they can't. And if you can do that and you can allow yourself to be seen and you can release this fear of it, then the right opportunities come to you. Then the right collaborators come to you, and you don't really need to like fight with more like buy another course on like how to go viral on social media. You start speaking your truth, you're going to reach the right people. And it's that simple. If you start allowing yourself to be seen, you're going to attract the right business collaborators. Your business is going to grow just because you're being authentic in you and you're putting yourself out there in a vulnerable way. So on that note, if you want to do a reading, you can click the link in our show notes. You can come DM me on Instagram, and I'll see you next week. Love ya.